And I believe someone is going to take possession of it. And if it's already been done and someone is taking possession of it and it leaves the ecosystem, it becomes exponentially more bullish. And that is simply this, that the silver is leaving the exchanges, that the silver is being accumulated rapidly.
This is Kaiser Johnson with Liberty and Finance, and this is the Miles Franklin Weekly Special for August 28th through September 4th, 2023, while supplies last. This week we feature your choice 1-ounce silver rounds at just $2.50 over spot. Choose between the Silver Buffalo or Silver Asahi rounds, both at $2.50 over spot, both 22 a tube, and both 500 to a box. The Silver Buffalo is made by various private mints across the U.S., with a design based on James Earl Fraser's iconic Buffalo nickel. These 3/9 fine rounds are highly recognizable and one of the most trusted types of bullion rounds available. Next, the Asahi refinery continues the legacy of famed private mint Johnson Matthey, which they purchased in 2015 and refined with the same attention to detail, cementing their status as an LBMA certified supplier. Their 1-ounce rounds are also 3/9 fine and also on sale for just $2.50 over spot. Additionally, the Asahi rounds are IRA eligible. If you'd like to learn more about a precious metals IRA, call us, and we'll be happy to help you in that process. To order our specials or any of the many other options we have available, call us at 1-888-81-LIBERTY. That's 1-888-815-4237. We're available after hours and on weekends, and we look forward to speaking with you.
Welcome back to Liberty and Finance. We are always glad to have this upcoming returning guest. I'm going to explain about the black eye in just a moment, but we're here to welcome Andy Schectman, the CEO of Miles Franklin Precious Metals, for this weekly market update. Today is Tuesday, August 29th, 2023. Andy, thanks for coming back on Liberty and Finance.
It's great to see you, tough guy. Looks like you got into a fight and protected your
this
wife's
happened
honor.
on the pickleball court, and you should see the other guy. More specifically, I was running back to get a lob. I don't let them go. I never let them go. I always run for them. People think I'm crazy, but I about 50% of the time will make ones that people think are impossible to get. This time, my shoes got tangled up underneath me. I went down, face planted, and on my wrists and my face. My glasses got pretty much destroyed, and they did my glasses actually did most of the damage to my face. So anyway,
that's some serious pickleball cred.
Yeah, my wife whisked me off to a urgent care, and I was delightfully grateful to God that he said, there's nothing you need. You don't need any stitches. Your vision is fine. You're going to be just fine. Just go home. So instead of going home, we went back to the courts and played several more games.
Yeah, next time that happens, just take the blood, wipe it all over your face, and say, let's go. Let's keep playing. And you'll be a legend on the pickleball courts.
Well, actually, they said it was the first time anybody's run off to the doctor and come back and played the day out, because we came back and played several more matches after. So, speaking of the need to be tough guy, hard times are likely on the way. We're not glad to announce that, and the people who've been following this channel for a decade, since 2013, know that we are reluctantly preparing for what looks like increasingly not only probable but inevitable of tough times ahead. And one of the main focuses of that tends to be financial for people. We've certainly seen lots of examples of that around. You've been watching specific areas of that arena very closely. Could we start off with an update from you, since just last week was this worldwide conference of the BRICS plus nations in Johannesburg, South Africa. What were the key takeaways for you from that gathering, and what do you think we need to keep watching going forward in that regards?
Yeah, look, the key developments were, of course, the 6 new members being Argentina, Ethiopia, Egypt, the United Arab Emirates, Iran, and Saudi Arabia. And, especially when you talk about UAE, Iran, and Saudi Arabia, you're talking what amounts to 80% of the world's oil production, and in the BRICS sphere of influence, and you're talking the majority of commodities that are mined around the world or accumulated over the world are in the BRICS sphere of influence. And that's something that I think should not be taken for granted. If you're going to build a sphere of influence, if you're going to build this new ecosystem, I think you start with the energy situation. And, you look at what's what's going on behind the scenes here. And, a lot of people wanted Jim Rickards' prognostication that there would be a gold or commodity-backed currency issued on the 22nd. Look, don't be dissuaded by that at all. This is something that will happen, I believe. The probability of the BRICS nations eventually pegging their new currency or their new settlement currency to a form of something stable like gold or commodities using distributed ledger technology, that's coming. But look at the pieces that are happening along the way. Just in the last few months, we noticed that the U.S. Treasury holdings of Saudi Arabia are at a 6-year low right now. And the cumulative selling of debt is growing and growing and growing. The United Arab Emirates just sold $4 billion worth of treasuries. These countries that have traditionally been Western friendly, that are recycling their profits for selling us their oil in treasuries is dwindling. And I think that's really something that people need to focus on. But here are a couple pieces to chew on that I think people should think about. I've talked a lot about the game of Jenga on your show, or the term logarithmic decay, little by little by little, then all at once. Well, the little by little can go on longer than people really want it to. This instant gratification is something that really, I think, is a mistake. Look at the big picture, or the game of Jenga. How many little pieces do you pull out before the whole thing tumbles over? So let's start with this one. Macron, right, the president of France. We talked a lot about how he signed a 50-point treaty agreement with China, ranging from 5G to military engagement. We talked about how he did a big deal with the United Arab Emirates and for liquid natural gas and paid for it in yuan. We talked about how he applied, or asked to be, not applied, but asked for admission to the BRICS meeting, although he was turned down. Listen to what he had to say here as it pertains to current events. I'm going to read this to you. It says, Macron, the president of France, says the world order is changing, with the situation getting tougher and more complicated, which runs the risk of weakening the West and Europe in particular. He also stressed the need to avoid partitioning the world over the Ukraine war at a time when many countries from the global south, that would be the BRICS, have refused to condemn Russian aggression. We must avoid a narrative that claims this is Europe's war. It doesn't concern us, he says. Well, look, sides are being drawn here, Dunnigan, and that becomes very, very obvious. He also said, listen to this one, France is seeking a trusted partner on the geopolitical front, added Macron. So, I mean, is that like geopolitical Tinder? What is he talking about? What, I thought the U.S. and the G7 were his trusted partners. Do you see where he's hedging? He's hedging that he wants to be part of the global south and be viewed as a trusted partner. Here's another one to chew on. A Chinese firm has secured a contract from Iran to upgrade its major international airport. But wait till you hear how they're paying for this, Dunnigan. Iran was awarded a $2.7 billion airport project to their biggest airport to modernize it to a Chinese contractor. The company has been selected to carry out the project after intensive negotiations with several domestic and international contractors, he said. However, Iran will pay for the project using a barter mechanism that allows swapping crude oil for financial resources, equipment, and technical services. Do you see subversion of the U.S. dollar? Do you see how they are doing the workaround? Little by little by little by little, we are removing the settlement status of the dollar. And as more and more and more things settle outside the dollar, what does that do for the reserve status? And as these countries sell their bonds, as we just mentioned, they're selling bonds, which is what makes the dollar the reserve, right? But on top of it, they're settling outside the dollar. But this is nothing new, because Chinese firms have been helping Iran develop their oil fields, as an example, after the Japanese and the European companies pulled out of the country due to the sanctions over Iran's nuclear program. Here again, sanctions, coercion, being hypocritical, being a bully. It's okay for us to sanction Iran for whatever reason we deem necessary, but when we go into Iraq and destroy it, and under the guise of weapons of mass destruction, don't find it, say, we're sorry, there's no ramifications for us. What Iraq is not real happy about that, by the way, as they just made it illegal for businesses to trade in dollars, go to prison for it and lose your business. So when you see the fact that China has not gotten involved in these sanctions, they're doing things in terms of mutual cooperation. Yeah, and maybe it's to their advantage, but so what? They're smart to stay out of everyone's business and to instead cooperate to build a better life for both parties rather than go in there and say, no, you're out. Just like we sanctioned the French bank and fined them $4 billion for trading with Iran. These are things that are going to come to the detriment of the United States. How about this one? Turkey and Saudi Arabia signed a deal Monday aiming at forging further cooperation in the field of critical minerals, energy, and natural resources. So, that's no big deal. Well, how about the fact that the trade between Turkey and Saudi Arabia has gone up by over 600% since January of this year? And, you go in there and you see the president of Turkey signing contracts in the fields of energy and direct investment, defense, and media. Defense. So they're working on these deals. I thought Turkey was an ally of the West. Well, you can see sides are being chosen. And one last piece that I would like to talk about regarding the BRICS. One thing that James Rickards said, and unfortunately, a lot of the things that he publicly said were going to happen didn't. And this is one of the mistakes people make, and I like him a lot, right? I respect him. I had a couple-hour conversation with him recently at the Rule Investment Conference, and I think he's as smart as they come. But I would caution anyone to ever say a date, because if it doesn't happen, people say, it's a nothing burger. If you talk in terms of probabilities in a world of no guarantees, if you talk in terms of generalities and macro perspectives, you don't pay attention to the rustling leaves. It's part of the bigger picture of the forest. And that's really something I've never really gotten into, and that is to go out and pick a date. Well, his information was spot on. Ultimately, I believe he will be proven correct. To say certain things were going to happen the 22nd was a mistake, in my humble opinion. And I mean, no disrespect to Mr. Rickards, he's as smart as they get. But one of the things that he said that I took and added into my presentation at the Rule Investment Conference, because he said it, gave him full credit for it, was that the Eurasian Economic Union and the Shanghai Cooperation Organization would most likely join with the BRICS nations at this meeting. And they were all invited. Their delegates were invited. Now, I have been mentioning those groups along with the Belt Road Initiative and the BRICS together in almost all of my conversations, because it's obvious it's going to happen. Russia's a member of all of them. Saudi Arabia is BRICS, Belt Road, Shanghai Cooperation Organization. So there's so much of this crossover that it's obvious it's going to happen. So there have been meetings lately, although it didn't formally happen at BRICS. Again, that's something I feel bad for Mr. Rickards. I hope his credibility wasn't damaged at all, because the information will be proven to be correct. In my opinion, the probability of his information being proven correct over time, I believe, is extreme. But there have been meetings to discuss economic cooperation between the chairman of the Eurasian Economic Commission and the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. And the discussions were reported by the Eurasian Economic Commission, and the whole drive of the meetings was to provide not only greater cooperation, but also to assimilate into the BRICS, if you read the article. It's going to happen. And I just want to send a shout out to Mr. Rickards and say, your information was spot on. I still stand behind it. I do believe that they will issue a gold-backed or a commodity-backed currency. I gave him full credit on it and said he had the courage to say that when I didn't, in terms of the day that it would happen. But the inevitability of it, in my opinion, is as strong as what he said would happen on the 22nd. We don't know when it's going to happen, probably next year. If you look at what the finance ministers were tasked with doing, they were told to go to the drawing board, come back with ideas to come back with a new currency system, or a way for us to use local currencies or combine into a settlement system. And the next meeting for the BRICS next year will be in Russia. Look for that to be a very strong possibility. But any way you look at it, the music didn't stop because BRICS didn't issue a gold-backed currency on the 22nd. In fact, you can see the wheels are continuing to spin faster and faster and faster in terms of these relationships that are being made. And if you look at what happened to Gaddafi and you look at what happened to Hussein, you better not cross the Rubicon completely until you've got all sides covered. And I would say they're getting much, much, much closer to that moment. Hasn't happened yet, but it's coming. So I think that this is just more evidence of a growing coalition of countries that are trying to do something that has been 17 years in the making. The weaponizing of the dollar has sped it up dramatically. And if the people in this country have any mistakes whatsoever in the way that they look at markets, we've talked about normalcy bias, we've talked about recency bias, I would add one more, and that is that instant gratification is not fast enough. In a world where in the last 4 years, more money was created than the history of the country before it, while suppressing interest rates, stepping on Mother Nature and suppressing interest rates, where the banks were controlling the rates, not the market, you created massive distortions where everyone thinks your house price is supposed to double in a year and your 401k double in a year and 5x on your cryptocurrency portfolio in a year is normal. We have been, I believe, misdirected into believing that markets move at that level. My mentor, Richard Russell, said if you make 6 or 7% a year, you are a rock star. So in this very, very important, maybe once in a lifetime generation global shift, it will not happen all at once until it does. Better way of saying that, little by little, 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 bang, all at once. Where are we on that logarithmic decay curve? Are we close to the falls? Are we still ways to go? The little by little by little by little keeps happening, and it's going faster and faster. So the river's starting to go down a little more, a little more, a little more. Are we to the point where we can hear the falls in the horizon? Maybe, maybe not. All I'm simply saying is the inevitability of hitting the falls, in my opinion, grows by the day. Things are getting interesting, that's for sure.
Yeah, there are several other tense, dramatic approaches that we're also monitoring along the way. Two that come to mind is the fragility of the Western banking system. Alistair McLeod, former bank director, has been keeping us apprised of that. And we've seen just in the last quarter, the second, third, and fourth largest bank failures ever in the history of the United States happen. And yet people think that it's normal now. And it's because we haven't had any for a few weeks now that must be all clear and safe. The other one is massive transfers of physical metal off-taking from the major exchanges, and watching that pot boil down and go, this can't be forever. We're on a collision course with reality here. Could you pick us up on that last one about what you're seeing in terms of the drawdown of physical metals and whether there's a turnaround in place?
Yes, I will, but let me first address the first point. I love Alistair. I think he's as smart as they get. There's no wonder that the banks are in trouble. The 3-month Treasury on January 1st, 2022 was at 0.06%. Today it's at over 5.5%. You wonder why the banks are in trouble. You wonder when you are seeing that the reverse repo market administered overnight by the Fed is still allowing the money markets to house all of their money in the overnight reverse repo market. The Fed is allowing this to happen, which that sucking sound you hear, the people running out of these regional banks, like 16 or more of them just been downgraded by S&P and Moody's. I think that was their way of clearing their conscience. There's going to be bank bail-ins, the way that the Dodd-Frank law was written. Look at Schwab. Their bank right now, I believe, has 130% of equity in this short-term lending program with the Fed. 130%. They're on razor's edge. They are they're sandwiched in between Silicon and Signature in terms of where they were in this paradox of having all of these unrealized losses. And look at PNC Bank. there's going to be a bail-in, and I really believe there will be a bail-in that will light the fuse. It's coming, and I think it's what they want. They are aiding and abetting it by allowing the reverse repo market to take all the money market funds. They had talked several months ago about disallowing that because that was what was pulling most of the money out of the regional banks. When you can get 5.5% or 6% in a money market with daily liquidity in a too big to fail bank, or leave it in Truist Bank, who's on the edge, or any of these other banks who are on the edge. If they fail, you get bailed in. And if you do get bailed in, you're an unsecured general creditor of anything over $250,000. It's gone. And why would you leave it there when the best you can get in a 1-year CD is under 5%, or 0.5% in your savings account, if you're lucky, or put it in a money market in a too big to fail bank that won't get bailed in because they're too big to fail, earning 10 times what you get in the savings account with daily liquidity. I mean, come on. They are aiding and abetting this. And the treasuries that are directly on a 5-month or a 3-month treasury at 5.5%, do you really wonder why money is flying out of the commercial banks, even the too big to fail? If you're that sophisticated, you can go right to treasurydirect.gov and buy right from the U.S. government 3-month treasuries at 5.5% and sidestep all the banking issues. If you can't take a step back and see that this is happening and is going to happen, I got news for you. You're not paying close enough attention. And I do believe this is what they are looking for. They're going to cull the regional banks. And when the next one gets bailed in, when the majority of the public has no clue what a bail-in is, wait until you see what happens to the availability of gold and silver in this industry, when finally people say, oh my goodness, where do I go? Since we were little kids putting nickels in a piggy bank, we think that's safe. Most of the people in this country do not know what a bail-in is, and it was written into the Dodd-Frank law. And the fact that Silicon and Signature were bailed out is what created so much anger by the representative from Oklahoma. We've gone over that. But even ask yourself, why did Silicon Valley Bank have $14 billion for 3 years and 10 checking accounts? Where was risk management of the bank? Where was risk management of those corporations? And where the heck was the FDIC then? Oh, but let's bail them out, right? I mean, the whole thing stinks to high heaven. And if you don't think there will be bail-ins, I got news for you. I'd bet my life on it. Anyways, to your second point, which is important as well. Before I touch on that, I just want people to understand one thing. Recently, if you type in on Google, $ XAUWCU with the $ in front, this is a index that talks about the 20 largest economies in the world and the way that gold is valued against them. And if you look, in the last 5 years since 2020, gold on this index, which is measured against all of the other currencies of the world, the 20 biggest economies, is up 60%. And it's up almost 10% this year alone. The dollar's strength, the unjustified, inordinate, stupid strength of the dollar, is what is blurring the reality the rest of the world clearly sees. To your point about the amount of silver transferred out of or into, shall we say, the registered category, we've seen 14.3 million ounces transferred by JP Morgan into the registered category. Now, some people would say, well, that's silver for sale. They're trying to drown the market. First of all, they only have about that much left in the registered, in their eligible category that doesn't belong to SLV. They have like 134, something to the extent of 134 million ounces. I think that's about right, in their eligible category, of which over 100 million ounces supposedly belongs to, or 120 million belongs to SLV, which would then by extrapolation mean they only have 14 million ounces of their own left in their eligible category. Of course, Ted Butler will tell you that the billion plus ounces that they accumulated is all off balance sheet. However, the point is that people would say, well, they're dumping that kind of silver volume into the registered category, spiking the registered category. My viewpoint on it is that it has already been sold and someone is going to take possession of it. You have to move to registered in order to deliver. So, we have 9 or 10 BRICS locations around North America, the biggest being in BRICS New York City, JFK, which is the only COMEX facility of our entire BRICS network. I have 2 clients there, both with over 1 million ounces and 1,000-ounce bars. That's eligible. They have been approved as a COMEX eligible bar. They're assayed. If they want to sell them, they got to go to registered. Well, what if they already sold them and we arranged a deal for you, Dunnigan, to take possession of 1 million ounces of bars? In order to do that sale, they would have to be moved to the registered category. And then you would take possession of them, or they would go to your new eligible account. Anyways, that's pretty much how it works on a broad scale when you're talking about futures and about the prospect of taking delivery. So some people look at that as being bearish. I look at it as being bullish. I look at it, in my opinion, you'll see that spike very soon go right back down to where it was prior. And if it leaves the COMEX ecosystem and does not stay in someone else's eligible category, but leaves, becomes exponentially more bullish. And so there's been, there's a guy out there named Bob Coleman. I think he's got good information. And he talked about how there's this weird phenomenon all of a sudden of all of the borrowable shares, or a large portion of them, disappearing off of SLV, where they can borrow shares, or people can borrow shares to sell short. The latest report from Wednesday, August 24th, showed that the short position in SLV declined by 11%. And, by the way, if you realize BlackRock issued a warning a couple of years ago to all those short SLV, saying there could come a time when there wouldn't be enough metal to cover. Covering their base by saying that early enough. But anyways, I did a little digging, and here's what I found. Over the past month, JP Morgan Chase has been steadily retracting borrowable shares of SLV to ensure they have sufficient physical silver on hand to meet delivery obligations for contracts. They only need to transfer the surplus silver acquired from retracting these SLV shares. Now think about it. What did I just say there? That they have been steadily retracting borrowable shares of SLV to ensure they have sufficient physical silver on hand to meet delivery obligations for contracts. Well, they just transferred 14 million ounces to registered. Is that a delivery obligation? I believe it is. And then it says they only need to transfer the surplus silver acquired from retracting the SLV shares. In other words, they take possession of the SLV shares and they can take possession of the silver that way if they want to. And it's called share redemption, and it's much more private than actually taking it off of SLV. Anyways, hence, as the delivery date grows near, JP Morgan Chase would make concerted efforts to shift silver into the registered category. Sound familiar? That's exactly what they're doing. They are taking that silver that they in the form of retracted SLV shares, they're taking the bars behind it and moving it into a registered category, and I believe someone is going to take possession of it. And if it's already been done and someone is taking possession of it and it leaves the ecosystem, it becomes exponentially more bullish. And that is simply this, that the silver is leaving the exchanges, that the silver is being accumulated rapidly. And to put it all into context and put a bow around it, where are the commercial banks positioned right now? Oh yeah, net long. Commercial banks are net long in the futures market. Are they expecting something big? Are they expecting a price explosion? Maybe they are. Sure seems like it could logically happen against the backdrop of a world that seems to be spinning out of control faster and faster and faster and faster. So I know we covered a lot there, Dunnigan, but my goodness, the one thing that sticks out to me more than anything is that, I've been doing this now for over 3 years, and the amount of information that is available to discuss week to week, it's like a novel compared to what used to be Cliff Notes. And as the Chinese curse says, may you live in interesting times. These are anything but dull and complacent, my friend. So I'll shut up and listen to any questions that you have regarding.
Well, one of the observations that I was making as you went through these various scenarios of pots about to boil dry, the exchange is about to run out of registered shares. Oh, you've got to get more ounces in there, but you can only do it by pulling back, by retracting borrowable shares off of SLV. It gives the impression to the ordinary person of basically major titanic moves by those who are much better informed, have the ability and the sophistication to do moves that are so far beyond the reach of the ordinary individual. We've had Rafi Farber on our show, and he explained his grueling nightmare of trying to take delivery of just a couple bars off of COMEX or out of SLV, and what he had to go through and filling out all the forms and resubmitting them and filling them out again and then paying these fees and everything. He said, if it's not impossible, it's at least made to seem impossible to an ordinary mortal.
As a side note to that, it was Rafi, myself, and Chris Marcus. The three of us tried to do this, and we did it through something brokers, interactive brokers, something along those lines. They had a deal where you could take possession, and I did not want to use any of my contacts whatsoever in the futures market. I didn't want to use any of Miles Franklin's contacts that we hedged through, because I wanted to see how hard it would be for the average person to take possession, and it was a nightmare. You're talking Rafi and Chris and myself, who all have far more sophistication in this than the average person, and the three of us we had to send money to add to the margin account, all sorts of stuff, and it never happened, and we just gave up on it after about 6 weeks of trying. It was ridiculous. So when I tell you, Interactive Brokers was the name of that company, when I tell you how hard and sophisticated it is to do this, that should not be lost on people. It would be easier for someone to write us a check for $50 million to buy silver COMEX bars that I will find a way to deliver to you than it would be to take delivery off the exchange. That I can promise you. So it's something that should really be understood, the sophistication of draining the exchanges.
Yeah, so where I was going with that, and thank you for being part of that triumvirate, it reminds me of Undercover Boss or Secret Shopper, that kind of thing, where you actually go in and don't let people know that you actually do have contacts and you do have know-how and you really understand how these things work, and then you see how tough it is on an ordinary human. So for the ordinary humans that are subscribers to our channel, you often provide a weekly special that makes it easy, or comparatively easy, for people to take physical possession without having to go through this impossible tooth pulling to get anything off of the COMEX or the SLV. And could you let us know what's available this week and what people should be aware of taking advantage of?
Yeah, I'm a gold bug. Dunnigan, I've always been a gold bug. But I realize that silver, and has been for the last couple of years, in my opinion, the most undervalued asset in the world, and the opportunity of a generation, the value of a generation. I don't say that flippantly. I mean that sincerely. Hard for me to get away from continuing to recommend silver. We're going to see a moment where it becomes so hard to get and the prices take off. And I know it's coming. The inevitability, the probability grows by the day. So with that, I'm sticking with silver again today at $250 over spot. The Asahi silver rounds, one of the highest quality silver rounds in the industry, the old Johnson Matthey Corporation that sold to Asahi. They're beautiful. We have various designs of Asahi rounds. It'll be dealer's choice, whatever we have. But whichever ones that we give you, they are the highest quality of rounds that are not made by a sovereign mint, in my opinion. And so lovely, lovely rounds, and a way to add silver at a really good price, available for immediate delivery. So until really something changes that I have no choice but to recommend gold, we will continue to recommend silver because it is a better value. In the end, if I had only one trade to make, I might make gold, because I think before everything flushes out, gold will be the place to be, maybe. But when you look at silver and the opportunities of playing the gold to silver ratio, of looking at just how undervalued it is, and realizing an expanding utility in green, in digital, and in munitions or warfare, in missiles and whatnot, where 500 ounces in the tip of every Tomahawk cruise missile, and anything of that sophistication in terms of their guidance system, then it's real. You have a rapidly growing demand industrially for silver, and a realization by a growing portion of the world that silver not only is an undervalued asset, but it has been money for over 5,000 years. It's too hard for me to ignore. So we're sticking with silver again. 1 ounce Asahi brand rounds at $250 over spot, and no minimum order, and they're available for immediate delivery.
Very well. And I just wanted to follow up with one. It's not just one client, but many clients have been asking with renewed concern Just as we were talking a few moments ago about the fragility of the U.S. banking system, we've talked about how that contrasts to the relative stability of the private non-banking vaulting system. For example, one of the worst places you can store precious metals would be in a bank savings deposit box, a safe deposit box, which actually is a misnomer. Safe deposit box is not safe because it's within the confines of the bank. Therefore, it's considered like all your other things you think you have in the bank, an unsecured loan to the bank. But can you talk to us about addressing a concern that's been expressed recently with increasing concern by many clients, and that is how stable we believe the vaulting system to be, even though it is private, even though it's separate from the banking system, in the event of a financial crisis, which we think is probable and perhaps inevitable. Do we have any update for people on the relative benefits of holding metals in your own possession versus in a vault, or maybe it's a both and hybrid scenario that emerges? Your latest thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, it is a both situation. I mean, look, if you live on a ranch and you can dig holes all over the place and use a GPS system to remember where you buried them, it can be your own vault. This is why guys like Bix Weir say if you don't hold it in your hands, you don't own it. The removal of counterparty risk. That's why Doug Casey says gold and silver are the only assets that are not simultaneously someone else's liability if you hold it yourself. With that being said, I have supreme confidence in the vaulting systems that we employ, but I am not too naive to realize that there is something to be said for removal of counterparty risk. But that doesn't apply to everyone. People don't have the ability some people don't, to store large amounts of silver. You could put $1 million worth of gold in a briefcase and literally sprint down the road to your car. But $1 million in silver is going to weigh over, 2,500 pounds. And you're not going to be able to do that unless you're really strong and really fast. And I think that the point that people make about that is one that they could answer themselves just by drawing a logical outcome. You don't want to be penny wise and pound foolish with storing it in facilities that do not completely segregate it, or maybe fly by night. The private vaulting places in strip malls and stuff like that, stay away from it. Certainly not a safe deposit box in a bank. But if you have to store it in a facility, make sure it's a big one, like BRICS, who has a massive balance sheet, where gold storage is a very small portion of what they do. I think that there's no easy way to answer this, but that's why I've hitched my wagon to BRICS and to the Dakota Depository. Now, the Dakota Depository is a private facility, but I have worked hand in hand with their family for 33 years. They are family to me. I understand intimately their finances and their character and who they are. Well, you're trusting me on that. Is that good enough? Don't know. All I can say is do your due diligence, do what you have to do in order to feel comfortable and sleep well at night. There is no perfect answer to that question. That question is very valid. The answer is these what-if questions are impossible to answer. But I think you do the best that you can. You hope for the very best. You prepare the best you can for the worst. And that's why I don't leave everything in a depository. But if you are going to work with a depository, do some due diligence. I will stake my reputation on the Dakota Depository. I have $65 million of inventory there, or more. And I've worked with them my whole career. And, this is a situation where if you want complete and total peace of mind, take possession of it. But then you have other issues, theft and fire, and God forbid. So, do the best you can, mitigate your exposure, spread it around, take possession of some, use a couple different vaults. Maybe that's the best, but don't choose fly-by-night. Don't choose any that don't have a good reputation or a substantial balance sheet.
And one thing you didn't mention, but I know you have in the past, is always insist on allocated, segregated, and audited. Do not go for pooled or commingled storage under any circumstances.
Right, and the word allocated, we want to take out of that statement, because allocated is another word for pooled. Segregated is in your name. So, for example, IRAs that allocate the metal to a program, but don't segregate it to Dunnigan, that's pooled. So if it's allocated and segregated, that's good. If it's just allocated but not segregated, that's a problem. That means pooled. And there can be wordplay sometimes. So the most important word you're looking for, and you're right, without question, is segregation in your name. That way, at least you know that your metal is not being lent out. There are no games being played with it. It is not rehypothecated. And you will get what you bought, including the year, the specific coin, etc. Whereas allocated would mean, or pooled would mean, yeah, you put Silver Eagles in there, you'll get Silver Eagles back, not the ones that you gave them probably. And the condition or the year or whatnot may not be the same. So that's why we want segregated always 100% in your name. And that's the only way to ever store anything in any facility.
Yeah, that reminds me, that's when they give you your stuff back because it's yours, because you have legal title to it. It reminds me when I bought some brand spanking new beautiful LP tanks and propane tanks with gauges attached to them at Costco, went to get them filled up at the local filling station, and then when I went back, I said, yeah, can I switch these out? Because I'm in a hurry. He said, oh, no, you don't want to switch these out. We'll fill these back up for you again. You don't want to see the cruddy ones we've got. So...
yeah, well, that's the exact same thing. And if we had more time, I would tell you about 3 or 4 very bad experiences I've had working with IRA custodians that do not segregate. This was much earlier in my career. They allocated, and I found out that's a bad mistake. Maybe next time we talk, I'll tell you about those experiences where what you just said is I can, with experience, validate and prove how important it is to physically have things segregated in your name. And it would be very similar to what you just said. Instead of it being pretty tanks with gauges, just talk about it being coins. It didn't look so pretty anymore and weren't really what we had anticipated receiving.
I think you just titled our next interactive talk that we should have together called Horror Stories from a Gold Company CEO. I think everybody would be interested. I certainly will. So,
yeah, I got a couple of them anyway, so no question about that. But as always, Dunnigan, I love our Tuesdays together. I truly do. They're cathartic for me. I've always told you that. And I appreciate what you're doing. I appreciate being here. And next time you talk to Alistair, say hello for me. Tell him I'm a big fan.
Will do. And thank you, everyone, for watching and for checking in with us every week for this Tuesday weekly market update with Andy Schectman. Guys, you don't want to miss a single episode with Andy, so you can find him here on Tuesdays. But for all our other guests, if you want to make sure you know who's coming up, make sure you go to libertyandfinance.com. That's our webpage, libertyandfinance.com. Put your name, email address, click submit. Make sure you confirm on the confirmation email. Then you're in one email in your inbox per day with our latest interviews with Andy or any of our other guests, and all of Andy's weekly specials are in there as well. So, Andy, on behalf of all of our viewers, thanks for joining us on Liberty and Finance.
You got it, my friend. We'll see you next week.
Miles Franklin Precious Metals is one of America's oldest and most trusted bullion dealers. Miles Franklin is A+ rated and accredited by the Better Business Bureau, licensed and bonded, and has 0 complaints ever registered. Here at Liberty and Finance, we are licensed brokers with Miles Franklin. To order, simply call us, discuss your needs, and we can let you know our live inventory, prices, and availability, and lock in your order over the phone. Once your order is locked, the price is held for you regardless of market fluctuations, and the metals are reserved for you awaiting your settled payment. Within 1 business day of ordering, you will receive an email invoice detailing the order and payment instructions. Miles Franklin accepts payments by bank wire, ACH or electronic check, money order, check mailed priority mail, and cryptocurrency. The fastest forms of payment are bank wire and cryptocurrency. Upon settled payment, metals will ship out within 3 to 5 business days. You will receive tracking information via email. Domestic shipping charges are $15 for any order under 500 ounces of silver or 10 ounces of gold. For orders larger than that, domestic shipping is free. The package will be boxed, fully insured, and labeled discreetly, with no indication of the contents inside. For your privacy, the name Miles Franklin will not even be on the package. To talk to myself, Kaiser, my brother Elijah, or my father Dunnigan, call 1-888-81-LIBERTY. That's 1-888-815-4237.